Hello, and welcome to Off the Roll. I'm your host, Troy Hirschman. Well, full disclosure here, it has been over a week since I did this interview with our guest, Lori Vancza. Lori is the occupational safety specialist at Indiana State University, but former co-head athletic trainer there. And Lori is really one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast. She has gone on past athletic training. She's a great athletic trainer, but she's also a great person and a lot more diversified since she got out of athletic training, I guess you could say, at the college level, and what she's done with her life. And I wanted to make sure that people heard her story as much as anything, and maybe got to know Lori a little bit through this podcast, because I know that there's a lot of people think that she's an incredible person, and I do too. But I wanted some more people to get to know Lori through that. So this podcast was going to be a platform to introduce some different people, maybe or maybe not with some Ball State connections. But as you'll learn in the podcast, Lori does have a Ball State connection, and it's really cool that she does. So, that's really why this podcast to me is important. It's introducing different people that for years have probably flown under the radar in the profession of athletic training, but have made important contributions to the profession of athletic training and the future of athletic training as well. And Lori has been a big, big part of that. So let's go off the roll with Lori Vancza. Welcome to Off the Roll. I'm your host, Troy Hirschman, and today we have with us is Lori Vancza. Lori is the almost retirement occupational safety specialist at Indiana State University, but former co-head athletic trainer there, and obviously has been around to other places. So welcome to the podcast, Lori.
Thank you very much, Troy. Appreciate you having me this morning.
Oh, no, this will be awesome. So here's like the question I've asked everybody is how did you kind of get started, or who introduced you to athletic training?
Okay. All right. Well, it dates back to my high school days at McCutcheon High School and being an athlete there, volleyball athlete under Lonnie Worthington in Lafayette, Indiana, and had a pretty significant ankle injury. And of course, back in mid 70s, no athletic trainers in the high schools, and so had a pretty significant ankle injury. And my coach Lonnie Worthington had gone to Purdue University and had taken athletic training courses from Pinky Newell, and so at that time had a good relationship with Pinky, and so I was taken to Purdue University to see Pinky Newell, and was just obviously just totally, just I couldn't even describe the impact that he had. I mean, basically, that's why I am where I was at in athletic training, was because of Pinky. I mean, he was just so genuine and so caring, and just a great young man, or great man, and it just really influenced me. And I had several injuries after that, and just really got into the whole, took the Kramer athletic training course back in, 76, 77, and just followed him and wanted to be just like Pinky, since I, interacted with him back again, 75, 76, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And was that the correspondence course that you took then?
Right. Yeah. Kramer correspondence course. I took that when I was, I think, a senior in high school. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So who else was at Purdue at that time?
So then I went on then to go to attend Purdue University, and my mentor was Denny Miller, and Jim Russ, and then Denny, of course, stayed at Purdue and retired from there, and then Jim left to go to Notre Dame, and stayed in contact with him, and then Sue Hillman was my assistant athletic trainer.
Oh, wow.
And she went on to do big things, and what a great person and a great influence for a young, female athletic training student, when they didn't have very many female athletic training people back then.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, at that point in time, I mean, it was kind of Andy Seeger at Ball State. You had Marge. Um,
Right. Right.
I don't know where
Katie at
Katie
IU.
at IU. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Not very many.
Not very many at all.
Right. Yeah.
And so therefore, yeah, you were kind of again on that doorstep of really women kind of getting their foothold in athletic training and then
Right.
kind of moving on from there. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Any and again, there's that Ball State connection, Jim Russ.
Right, Jim Russ.
That
Yeah, I forgot.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, Jim Russ and Ball State. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
I mean,
Yeah.
so even then there's a little bit of a connection with that. We just talked
Right.
about that a little bit, but
Right.
but
Right.
yeah, that's the thing where I think that the circular type of connections with people, especially in athletic training, um definitely kind of reinforces itself with that. And
Right.
Jim's not been a guest on the podcast. I'd love to get him. We've talked about it, but he's had some stuff that he's had to deal with here recently.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah. He would be great because
Yep.
he was a fireball. Yeah, I could tell you one story about Jim Russ that will live with me forever, and that he was a big wrestling. He covered wrestling when we were at Purdue, and I think he might have been the only athletic trainer to ever get a warning at a wrestling match. But he was awesome and a great mentor. Just,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That's I think that that again, you look back on the people that you've been connected with and help kind of bring you along, and it is kind of like, wow, I can't believe I didn't really appreciate it at the time, but now looking back, I was
Right.
really lucky to be in the spot that I was. So
Right. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
when you were at Purdue,
Hmm.
as a student, and you were a student in the athletic training program,
Right.
or as it was back then. So
Right.
what sports did you work when you were at Purdue?
Yeah. So when I attended Purdue, they didn't have a curriculum program like they do today. It was
Yeah.
an emphasis. So we had we were health education majors with a biology minor, and then our pre-athletic training, pre-physical therapy. So most of us were there for a little bit longer than 4 years, just because of all of our course requirements. But back then we worked everything. We did a little bit of everything. I did field hockey. I remember I getting sent on a field hockey trip by myself to the Poconos, and of course the athletic trainer that was working with field hockey, called the other athletic trainer, and that was a huge experience for
Yeah.
me. Of course, everybody worked for football because we only had 12 students on our staff. We had about 2 to 3 students per class. So, and
Right.
we had 50 or students back then. And when I was a freshman, actually, we had 50 to 60 students apply, and they only took 2 to 3 of us. So
Right.
Joe Bear and I were the only two, from
Yeah.
our class, and then Kathy Stroya, she kind of was in our class a little bit too, so it was
Yeah.
a very small, close-knit staff, and we did everything. We worked football, we did basketball games. I always tell this story, but it was always the funniest thing is working basketball. I loved basketball. I love football too, but we would sit right behind the coaching staff, at the basketball games, and everybody knows how Coach Katie was. He was,
Yeah.
he could get fired up, and he slammed back in his chair one basketball game after a call and ended up right in my lap, kind of thing. So I just kind of gently pushed him forward, but just some of those days with him and Bruce Weber, and just great relationships, and great memories. So yeah, football was great. I loved football, and was one of the first. I think I might have been the first. You could probably confirm this with Denny, but I think I was the first female to be able to travel to a bowl game.
Wow. Okay.
And so that again, new trends setting, in terms of getting females on the staff, and doing something other than just home game coverage. So that was a big highlight, at that time to do that. I remember Denny was great, just great guy, just West Point background. And we were just, I still break out the khaki pants every once in a while. I feel like I'm going back to Purdue again, with But yeah, I mean, he wanted women to wear culottes one time, and we were like, no way, we're not wearing culottes.
Yeah. Yeah. So
But
no white stuff, huh?
no white stuff.
Yeah,
No,
that's the story. That's the story that David Craig told me one time was obviously when they started out, Pinky, they were all wearing white, you know.
right,
And again,
right,
if you look at all the pictures from Bud Miller at Ball State and stuff, they were all
right,
wearing white. But David's
right,
story was that Pinky had sent him up to Minnesota to do training camp with the Vikings. So Fred
right,
Zamberletti and stuff.
right. Yep,
And
that
I
was a
guess it was
connection.
they had rained that morning or something, and they had an afternoon practice, and the field was really muddy, and they was having a scrimmage, and they called timeout, and David goes and runs out there on the field, but slips and falls on his back,
Uh-huh.
and so his whole back is like his front is
Blood.
white, but his back is brown, and I
Uh-huh.
guess he said that's and he said that's about the only time he ever saw Bud Grant crack a smile was when he fell in the mud.
Yeah,
So, and
yeah.
Fred had mentioned to him that you know, that doesn't happen very often, but you got it done, David. So,
Right, right. Yeah,
but
yeah.
but
We
no whites.
Yeah, no, we could ours were green scrub tops that we wore in the training room. That was kind of more of a medical thing. But if we went up to the field, then we had to put on either a white collared shirt or and those uh, tastefully gold pants, polyester pants that we used to wear.
Yeah,
But yeah, so
that's
yeah.
interesting. So where did the scrubs thing come from? You
Yeah,
think?
it was because we would work at the student health center with
Okay,
Pinky. Pinky at that time, when I was going through, he was over in the student health center in the PT department. And so when we would go over there and work, occasionally, and be able to spend time with him, we wore our green scrub tops. And the green scrub tops were, when you were taping and stuff, you get people's feet on you and all that kind of stuff. So we would wear, when we were working in the training room, we would wear green scrub tops. But if we went outside or out in public, when we had our dress attire on.
right. Yeah. No,
Yeah,
no. That's
yeah. So
yeah. I forgot about the connection between the
student health
health
center.
center, student health
Yeah,
center, and PT, and
right,
you know, and very much for the longest time, that's the way it was at Ball State.
right, right. Yeah,
With that, I mean,
yeah,
with Bud working in the health center and stuff. I mean, I've heard stories from JD and Glenn and those guys about
right.
how they would go over the same deal.
Yeah, yeah.
And doing that. So
Yeah, they were open every Saturday morning, like in mid morning or so, and so the students would do a rotation, as you got in your upper levels of years, that you would go over there and interact with the PTs. And yeah, so yeah, it was good. It was a great experience because a majority of our athletic training students at Purdue would go on to, physical therapy. And so that was,
right.
Both Jim and Denny were dual credentialed, so that was a big thing back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So do you have a few? You said you have a few Pinky stories.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't, yeah, he's just a great man. How he would come over on game day, he would come over to the training room, and he didn't really participate, but he would come over and hang out, and we would be
Right.
playing the fight storm songs, on the overhead, and get
Yeah.
ready, and just he it was just neat traveling with him to the NATA conventions. He knew everybody, and everybody would come
Yeah.
up and talk to him. And yeah, just an awesome guy. And you know I took a class from him. I was fortunate enough to take a class from him, and I would just his knowledge was just amazing. And I remember going up to him after the class was over and said, Pinky, you have no idea how much I learned. And he said, you have no idea how much more you're going to learn
Yeah.
as you go down the road, and
Yeah.
just a very humble man,
Yeah.
yeah, great guy. Yeah. So I feel so fortunate that I was able to have interaction with him, not only as a high school athlete, but then as an
Right.
athletic training student at
Well, I
Purdue.
mean,
Yeah.
again, you're one of the few around that says I got to take a class from Pinky Newell.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's really
Yeah.
so one of the things that that Sindri and Dickerson always told me, Snowball, like when they took a class from Bud, he would like write on the board all the
Oh,
stuff.
right.
Yeah, he would
Right.
write it all on the board.
Right.
And
Right.
and then there might be another board and he would start writing on that board. And if you couldn't, and then when he got done with that board, he'd go over and erase the first board that he wrote on and he would start writing
Yeah.
again on that board. I mean,
Yeah.
was it
Yeah.
similar to that?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, kind of. And the other thing that I remember, and I had it for a long time when I had that ankle injury. For my coach and I, when she took me over to see Pinky, he drew the whole little ankle and all the ligaments and everything, and explained everything, and I had that piece of paper with me, for years and years that he explained it. It was just amazing. Yeah. So yeah.
It's that's kind of a lost art. I mean,
right. It is.
I know that one of the first things in this job I got at Eastern Hancock, they didn't have any models, knee models, ankle models, and
right.
Actually, I got so desperate, I went on Amazon and bought some.
Right. Yeah.
Because it does help when you're trying to communicate that to
right.
a person, or if you have a place to, like,
right.
he just drew it for you, or
Yep.
if you have a model in front of you, or
Yep.
any of the stuff that you can
right.
kind of help somebody connect with what's going
right.
on.
And I think that's a true sign of a great clinician educator, that when they do pull out the models. I mean, I know I'm probably jumping ahead here a little bit, but Tom Cloakwhite with Methodist, he was awesome with those models and explaining, and now we've almost gotten to such technology now that I think maybe I'm not really involved in the profession anymore, but sometimes I think we've lost that art because it's so technology driven now. But
yeah they'll I mean, I've had kids Google, like, is this what I did?
Yeah.
I have to go, not really.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Not exactly, no.
Yeah.
But it was a nice try.
Yeah. Right.
So from Purdue, kind of what was your decision making in the next step of where you were at?
So I was an alternate PT. I interviewed at University of Indianapolis. That's where a fair amount of our athletic training students went. So I was an alternate there. I interviewed for a job up in northern Ohio and was offered that. Really kind of wanted to pursue my master's, and so one of my graduate athletic training students at Purdue, Sue Stanley, had been gone. I think she was maybe went to South Carolina, maybe in between or something, but then she was at Kentucky.
Okay.
And so then connected with Sue down there and ended up going down there to work on my master's and spent 2 years there in Lexington and going through their graduate program and worked with Sue and then Al Green. He was our head athletic trainer, and just again, just great people, great mentors.
Lori, you're naming off Hall of Famers here. I mean, holy smokes!
I know it. I was really lucky, and then of course, I got introduced to another great female orthopedic surgeon, Dr. Mary Lloyd Ireland, and actually went on to work for her then for another eight years then, because I stayed in Lexington and went into the high school outreach program there. But while I was at Kentucky, again, I was big football, did a lot of football work, was a graduate assistant for football, and then also did a little bit of gymnastics. I know you're a gymnastics.
Yeah.
I didn't have it like you did, but I did a little bit. So, but predominantly we were football there, and had some interaction a little bit with men's basketball, but not so much.
Who was the athletic trainer at Kentucky at that time for men's basketball?
Oh, you were working at Walt Jenkins.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Or not? No. I'm sorry, Walt McCombs.
Walt
McCombs. I'm sorry. Yeah, Walt McCombs. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he was So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, back in the day.
I don't know if I went to my first basketball game in Rupp Arena this past winter. Again, things that you get to do when you're not working college basketball.
Right.
So Tony Tony Cox and I, yeah, because we know the athletic trainer at Kansas. We went to the Kentucky-Kansas game,
Okay.
and it was absolutely insane. I
I
mean,
know.
I called it college basketball on steroids.
Yeah.
Just the atmosphere and
Unbelievable. Yeah.
yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I'm glad I
Yeah.
got to do it.
Yeah.
Because it was definitely an experience. I remember I took some video of the intros and just the
Yeah.
crowd. I mean, it was a sold out crowd. In fact,
Right.
we looked at our ticket stub and we were up in the nosebleed section and it still said $130 for those in bleacher
Yeah.
seats, you
Yeah.
know, and,
Yeah.
and it was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because, you have experiences like that and you think, you were in big time athletics. And I thought, I kind of thought the same thing when I was at, UK and Purdue and all that. And a couple of years ago, I actually went to a Texas Tech, Kentucky men's basketball game. Same thing, up in the nosebleed, same kind of scenario.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, oh my gosh, they got the shooting flames now, and they turn the lights off.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my,
Yeah. Yeah, we thought we saw some big time stuff.
Right. They've taken it to another whole level.
A whole nother level. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what high school were you at when you were down there after?
So I actually I was at I started out at Bryan Station High School.
Okay.
There in Lexington, and helped along with Dr. Ireland. We kind of developed a high school outreach there, and so I kind of oversaw. I think we ended up having 10 schools, and they had been doing a little bit of stuff there. Tim Newell had been doing stuff at Lexington Clinic for a number of years there with Dr. Kibler. But they were just doing kind of visit, like weekly visit kind of things. But we kind of took it to another level with Dr. Ireland and Central Baptist Hospital at that time, and formed Kentucky Sports Medicine. And we actually put athlete trainers in the high schools, pretty much like what you're doing now, full time.
Right.
So just huge. So I was at Bryan Station High School for a number of years, and then when they Steve Parker was our football coach then, and then they opened up another high school there, Paul Lawrence Dunbar, and so one of my assistant coaches went to be the head coach there, so I kind of jumped ship and then ended up before I left when I was at Dunbar High School. So yeah, great experiences. Oh my, yeah, great kids, great coaches. Just fun times.
Yeah. And really, so this is like the late 80s, early 90s, correct? Is that about right?
Yep, you're right. Yep.
Yeah. So really, the whole concept of high school outreach was just starting to kind of take. If you can think back, how many there? Certainly, like Lexington, maybe Louisville was probably about as close.
Right, yeah, because they were already doing it pretty good in Louisville. I was trying to think of the guy's name there, Tom. Yeah, I don't know, but they had some pretty good outreach programs going on there. And like I said, Tim Ohl and Ben Kimbler were really the ones that kind of started initially in Lexington with just some weekly visits, and so yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's again, I'm always interested when I have some guests on that kind of started something that now has probably expanded out to where it's almost like it's expected.
It's a given, right?
Yeah,
right.
It's a given. Yeah, exactly.
There was a guy down in Ashland, Kentucky, and I can't think of his name, but he was at Paul Blazer High School. They were pretty well established down there, at the time, but they're not very many. I mean, especially some of those Eastern Kentucky high schools. I mean, they just basically had nothing. I mean, we would go to those places and do physicals, and a lot of them, had never even seen an athlete trainer, or they would come up, on Saturday morning clinics, from the surrounding high schools where they didn't even know what an athlete trainer was, So yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool that again you were kind of at that doorstep of starting a lot of that and getting that going and stuff.
Right. Yeah.
So you were down there for a while, had these experiences. How how did you find out about the Indiana State? Was there something in between there and Indiana State? I guess I would say.
No. And I think in like around 90, Denny had called me. Denny Miller had called me and said, "Hey, there's a position open in Indiana State, blah blah blah." And Dick Hoover and Denny were close friends, and NovaCare was in process. And at that time, Indiana State was obviously very well known for athletic training. But the funny thing about the whole situation was it was just an academic unit. They had no clinical aspect, and so other than they kind of rotated through football, and then they had a men's basketball athletic trainer. And I'm losing his name now.
Ray Baggett.
Yeah, Ray Baggett. Yes, thank you. Yep. Yeah, and he was a milestone there in men's basketball. But like Bob Benke did football. Ken Knight did football. And so there were a number of people, but I'm not sure, the student program was just taking care of the rest of the sports, and was different. I don't know exactly how it worked before I got there. And so I kind of initially didn't follow through with it and kind of let it go. And then Denny called me again and said, "Are you sure you don't want to consider this?" I think it would be, because he knew that I was from Lafayette originally, and getting back up closer to home. And I was going through some other situations in Lexington, so I thought it would be a good opportunity for me. So I came up and went to work for NovaCare and Dick Hoover, and part of their arrangement was they had a contract at Indiana State to provide clinical athletic training services. So that's how I got involved. And then, and so then I think, 5 years after that, then actually we actually then became 1 year temp employees of Indiana State. Well, in between there was another couple other clinic kind of conglomerations. Hitchcock was, I think, bought out NovaCare, and so I worked for them for a year, and then Union Hospital and Methodist Sports Medicine tried to do a little thing, and I did work with them for a couple of years and was under the direction of Mark DiCarlo at Methodist. And then finally it happened the way it should have happened. We got on at Indiana State, and we were clinical athletic trainers at Indiana State.
It's interesting, again, kind of what you just explained. I mean you had Hoove kind of coming in with the NovaCare situation, and then another Muncie guy, Bill Hitchcock, who started his own clinic here and hired away Don Vogelsang in the mid '80s out of that area, and then kind of coming back around to the hospital and Methodist Sports Medicine, and that connection goes back a lot longer than a lot of people I think realize with Methodist, or Forte now as IU Health said, "No, you can't have Methodist. It's IU." But all kinds of I mean, and this is and so was Vinny, when he was there, was he more on still on the teaching side then too?
It's funny. Vinny and I have just talked recently a lot, because we just kind of crossed paths, but we had always been friends because there's a connection with his mentor and my mentor. So Skip and Denny went to West Point together. So, there's that West Virginia Purdue connection, so same thing with John D'Amelio, so, it just keeps coming around. So, so Vince and I think we might've been there for a half a semester together, but Vinny, I always see Vinny because he always comes up and still works the Special Olympics, and so is really good friends with some of my friends here in town. And so, he worked football and you need to get him on because he's it's going to happen. Yeah, it's going to happen. I think I'll get Glenn to co-host that with me, because there'll be more stuff revealed, from Lane. So the thing that I laugh at, because Neil and I went down, I think right before I took the job at the high school, and we went down and hung out with Glenn for a day, and
he was talking about Vinny, and he goes, Vinny's a school bus driver now.
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. Yeah. Right.
So,
yeah.
So we were laughing about how interesting that would have been if
yeah.
he rode on Mr. Stilger's school bus. So
right. I bet that would be a blast, wouldn't it? I know. When he told me that, I was rolling laughing. Yeah.
Well, I mean, again, I'm summoned, so we've all retired and started into something else, and
right.
And now we're just in a different area that wouldn't even think we'd be in. But
right.
Anyway.
So you said Glenn Snow, so I have to tell one other story. So Glenn Snow was on the accreditation team when I was a student at Purdue when we got accredited. So that was I'm not sure that, I mean, he may know me, but he was just, again, one of the big names back then, him and Ortho Davis and all the good guys,
Yeah. So, he and if you listen to one of those podcasts, his first one, and it's a little noisy because that was like when I was starting to do them, and we did it in a coffee shop there in Floyd's Knob, and it was supposed to be quiet, but it wasn't. And but he talks about how, basically Otho and Hoove and Sindri had just put him on all. Here he is. I'm a high school athletic trainer at Floyd Central, and I was on all these big time NATA education committees.
Right.
How did I get here?
Right.
How did I end up on this stuff? And it was just Otho and Pinky and those guys that they just they knew he was going to do a good job, and and so that's why he ended up on that stuff. But he was like, I'm just a little podunk, Floyd Central High School.
Central,
when it was podunk Floyd Central High School, not what it is now. And so it's funny how he tells that story about how he was doing all that stuff.
Right.
I'm thankful he did, because I think he probably did bring a really good perspective.
He did.
Particularly from what you're going to need when you go beyond the education program into a high school job or maybe even a college job with that.
Yeah. But, and all those guys were so professional. You just really looked up to them and admired them and emulated them and wanted to be like them. And but they were good guys, and they had fun, and they had personalities, and so
well, hopefully I'm going to go down. Neil and I are going to go down here pretty soon and go visit him again, because he's got this little we go down and visit and do some stuff, and then sometimes we'll go the digi jump stuff that he's involved with. We'll go down and see what's going on with that. But then we end up at this little cigar bar with all his cronies, and a lot of stories and lies get told doing that stuff. But
hey, that's the best part of retirement.
Exactly. Yeah. So you get to Indiana State, and you've gone through, which employer is it going to be this year type thing, and you finally get on in Indiana State.
Yeah.
So this is probably what, mid 90s, early to mid 90s.
Yep, mid 90s. Yep.
Yeah. So it's just
96, I think. Yeah. 96.
It's just you for a little while, and then that's when Dave comes along around that time, correct?
We had one other guy that I was co-head athletic trainers with, was Paul Schiss, and he actually went through Indiana State's athletic training program, and he was from Idaho, and was Ken Knight, Dr. Knight prodigy, and great guy. And so he and I were kind of co-head athletic trainers, and then we had another lady that worked with us, Kim Hannigan, that was from out east, California, Oregon gal. But then Paul left, and then Dave came on, and then we were co-head athletic trainers, and then from there, it just kind of all went all different directions from then they ended up with a one head athletic trainer, which was Dave, and then I took on the clinical education coordinator position. And so it was amazing. I was teaching clinical classes. I was a clinical education coordinator. I was a women's basketball athletic trainer. So when I wasn't at women's basketball practice, I was out supervising the graduate students at, I think we had 10 or 12 high schools where we had graduate students at that time. And then in between giving treatments and doing that, I was teaching clinical education classes, in their curriculum program, and now I think that's divided up in 3 different positions,
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think you look back on that now and I was around for some of that. So
Yeah.
you were hopping.
Yeah.
I don't know how you did it in the
Yeah.
aspect of trying to be in some of the same places at the same time and probably thankful for some graduate students that could help out with that.
Oh, right. Yeah. Lifesavers. Yeah. But it was all, it was all good. You did what you did back then. And, I formed some great relationships, and still some of them I've maintained. And obviously, this too, that you have classes that you just get closer to. And there's some classes I still stay in touch with now, some student athletes I still stay in touch with now, some athletic trained students that I still stay in touch with now. And so, those things, those are lifers, lifetime.
I think that's the blessing of this profession, is that you do work the long hours, and you've had those long hours, and you've had those kind of experiences and stuff, maybe even time away from your own family, but the relationships that you develop and have made, and friendships that you've made in that time away from your family are important. And it's great when you see those people that you talk about those things again, and you connect again, and catch up with them, and see their own kids, and or whatever, whatever they're doing with that, to do that. And I think that's the thing that people talk about, work-life balance. I think sometimes there was some compensation in that. With
not
the group that you
not
run.
Monetary.
Exactly. But
life compensation.
Life compensation. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And I think that enriches your life as much as just going to work and then coming home and just doing it all over again every day. It's still that stuff still matters. And again, sometimes when you have those, you run into those situations, and sometimes it benefits you. Like there's something going on in your life, and you need a little help with something, and one of those people that you helped before is now helping you.
Well, look at you. I just reached out to you not too long ago with asking for some help, and amazing.
It is. Exactly. So how long were you in that clinical role at Indiana State?
I left athletic training, I think in like 2007 or 8. So it was about a little over 10, 12 years. So I did the whole bag of tricks for about that. Well, I don't know, 10 years. I don't know. I'm not real sure. It kind of morphed into different things, but I'd say probably a good 10 years where I was doing women's basketball, clinical education, and
and definitely a lot of great people that were at Indiana State at that time. We just talked about Garland and McNichols and
wouldn't trade those guys for a world. In fact, I just ran into John the other day in the grocery store, and I still see I still see, Linda occasionally at functions, and and so what a great group of
Jim Bertoli and
just good.
Tim McGuire and Mark Smith. I need to catch up with Mark to find out.
Mark just retired, and
what he's doing.
I need to. I reached out to Kellen. I'm pretty good friends with the athletic trainer there now, Kellen. And I reached out to said, are they going to do some kind of retirement or something for him? But he never let me know, so I need to track him down as well.
I can't imagine Mark wanting anything done. At least that you'd have to trick him into showing
Yeah,
up.
right. You need to just come up and we'll go
That
take
would
him
be,
out. Yeah.
yeah, that would be good. That we could
Yeah.
have a lot of fun with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Great.
so this is when you moved into the role that you're kind of partially in, you're trying to get out of,
Yeah,
but
half a foot out, right?
yeah, half foot out, exactly.
Yeah,
So
actually 3/4 right now.
yeah. So explain to me a little bit what that, how that role paralleled in from athletic
Yeah.
training.
So I had just it's a athletic training, especially based on what I just described I was doing, it's a long grueling thing. I mean, I enjoyed doing it, but I kind of came to a fork in the road where I just I felt like I needed a change, and so I was fortunate enough because of the relationships that I had developed with the university. I ran into a lady that was doing our bloodborne pathogen training on an annual basis with our athletic training staff and students, and she was moving on, and I needed a change, and so I said to Jean, I said, hey, what do you think about me maybe being able to do what you're doing, kind of thing. And so one thing led to another. And Dave Ellis, who's my boss now, supervisor, who's the director of Office of Environmental Safety here at Indiana State and has been here for a long time, took a chance on me and appreciated my my relationships I had developed at Indiana State, and like any university, the politics that goes with it, knowing the politics are as important as and I wanted to stay here. I like the environment, I like the people, and so I morphed into the occupational safety specialist, and it actually was a great fit for me because I kind of went from athlete healthcare and prevention to employee safety and prevention. And so it wasn't, I mean, OSHA, picking up all the OSHA regs and stuff like that. It was a little bit of a learning curve, to get involved with that, but it's still caring about people and taking care of people and trying to keep people safe. And so and that's where my heart has always been and where it will continue to be. So
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that's a lot of things that I think, again, athlete trainers are uniquely equipped to really do those things. I think we're starting to see that a lot more with athlete trainers in the industrial setting and stuff. People are seeing that skill set that you have for healthcare with athletes can be translated, not just in what you just talked, not just with rehab and stuff, but more about what you've talked about. I mean, it was funny the other day. Our track athletes were inside practicing. We have one of the coolest things. We're a 2A school, but we've got a 5,000 square foot weight room with a turf track in it. And they were doing hurdles, but they were doing hurdles they had a ham glute machine. They have like 4 ham glute machines.
All right.
And they were doing the hurdles, like the ham glute machines were on the left-hand side, the walls on the right-hand side.
I can see it.
And high school kids on hurdles. Yeah. And so I pulled the track coach aside and I said, you guys might want to go the other way.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So, and he goes, oh, I never thought about that. But again, it's just one of those things that we're just innately trained to look at something and go, probably it's not safe. And you need to look at something like that to prevent that. And so you've obviously done a great job of translating your previous experiences into something like that.
Yeah. And I think the other nice transition for me was that, I essentially went from having no life, in terms of committing, with the travel and everything with, college athletics to working a 8 to 4:30 job, which was totally, since I was in college, was non-existent. And, so when somebody would suggest that I might do some training on a weekend or early morning, and they were, very apologetic that they were asking me to do it, I said, oh, it's no problem at all. Coming from, working, 60, 70, 80 hours a week, to work in a 40-hour week I felt like I was on vacation. So, and that's been a great transition for me because I do have I'm single, but I have a lot of outside interests. So it has.
Where's your ranking nationally as a pickleball player?
Yeah, I don't play so much pickleball anymore, but I did, and I took up pickleball and I traveled, went to all the U.S. Open and the Nationals, and again met a lot of nice people and have cool relationships, now when COVID hit, I kind of had a family member that was sick. And so I was kind of went into hiding for an opportunity to spend some time with her, and took up cycling. So
Wow.
now I'm into biking, and have done I don't know if you've heard the rain ride, that ride across Indiana. So I
Yeah.
did that. And this summer I'm going to do the rag drive, which is right across Iowa. So,
Yeah.
I picked up some other interesting hobbies, and into hiking, and going to do part of the Appalachian Trail. And I enjoy gardening, and, just
Yeah.
lots of things, so.
It is interesting that you find life out. I mean, that's where
Yeah.
all this, I mean, I was starting to do this at the end of Ball State, but now I was like, this is really cool. Now I've actually got time. I don't have to
To do-
squeeze it in somewhere. I can
Right.
schedule a time and do it,
Right.
and have time to work on it.
Yep.
I'm just scratching the surface. I'm still, I'm still less than a year out, and I'm involved in some 4-H stuff with our county
Right.
and whatnot.
Right.
And so,
Yep. Yeah,
I'm
I'm
just
doing.
trying to figure stuff out myself too right
Yeah.
now. So,
Yeah, I still catch up with Andy Myers at Zonka's on Tuesday afternoon
yeah.
for afternoon,
No,
vibration. And
how about that's the other thing too, is like you find out that people do things and get
Right.
together and actually just sit around and enjoy each other. Yeah.
Right.
Because I
Yep.
go to a Friday morning coffee group
Yep.
that includes the former provost at Ball State, and then the
Yep.
former president, John Worthen, and
Yep.
some coaches and stuff.
Yep.
They're out
Yep.
there. It's hilarious. They're out
Yep.
there solving the world's problems.
Right. Yep.
And
Yep.
spend a lot of time laughing about
Yep.
that too.
Right. Yep. Yep. Yeah. So I've done. Yeah. So I've people who retire or getting ready to retire and say they're worried about retiring. That's not me at all. I'm one of my other pickleball friends got me on the credit union board, and so I'm on that. And I work with a food pantry ministry out of St. Stephen's, and so that's a good thing, and I enjoy those people. So yeah, I'm busy. I'm trying to figure out how I kind of have to figure out how I can get it all packed in. So yeah, so it's all good. I wouldn't trade my life and my career for. It's just kind of worked out.
Yeah, it has. And
Yeah.
I'm glad that you're staying busy and stuff. Well,
Yeah.
listen,
Yeah.
I know you got to go. So I got this. I'm getting this wrapped up right on time for you. So,
Yep. Yep.
but yeah, I really appreciate you coming on and telling your story. It's a great story. I think again, the more people I've had on this podcast, the more kind of, even though they've been separate from what this podcast has started out with, which was interviewing, Ball State people or Ring of Honor people and stuff. But the more people that I have outside of that, I find
Right.
out that they're probably interconnected in some way, shape, or form,
Right.
or
Yeah.
influenced by somebody in some way, shape, or form. And you're definitely in that category. And
Right. Yeah.
you've had some great people to be connected with, and I
Yeah.
really
Very
appreciate
fortunate. Great
Yeah.
mentors. Yeah.
yeah, telling that story. I just appreciate you coming on and doing it. So
Yeah. It's
So-
been great chatting with you, and great to see you. And we need to link up, Troy.
oh yeah, we definitely do. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've gone
Okay.
off the roll with Lori Vancza. I want to thank Lori for coming on the podcast today. Her story is great. She really interacted with a lot of important historical athletic trainers along her career pathway, and I think that's awesome. I mean, not many people can say they took a class from Pinky Newell, and not many people can say that they worked closely with Dr. Ireland as well. And Lori got the chance to do all those things. So it was just cool to hear her tell those stories about that. So again, give us feedback on offtherollpodcast@gmail.com or on our Twitter account, offtherollpod1 at twitter.com. You can reach out to us on either of those places or on my personal Facebook page with those comments or recommendations, or if you didn't like what we had to say, you can say that too. That's fine. We're going to listen to it all. We'll read it all, no matter what. So hope you all have a great day, and I look forward to connecting with you guys again on our next podcast, hopefully coming up sooner than what this one took to get done. So have a great day. Thank you very much for listening.